Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and today we got a little bit of a special treat for you. I went through the effort to get the Dark Archive subscription just so I could bring all this content to you a week or so early. And I gotta say, I'll say it's pretty worth it, honestly. It's pretty good. I've had a few days to read through a few of the classes and archetypes, and so this week every day I'm going to be posting another class and or archetype from the Dark Archive. So I hope you all enjoy this treat, and since this is the return of why this class is awesome, let's go over the rules about how it works, because I think some people get a little confused as to the purpose. This is not a class deep dive. It has already been done. You can go online and you can find it. This is not a build guide or anything like that. This is going to be a short video. It's going to be a 20 plus minute video on why these classes are awesome, so that you can get an idea of what actually makes this class work, and you can decide to jump into it yourself. There are plenty of other videos out there talking about the Thaumaturge and the Psychic and how they work. This video is just to get you hyped for it and just to let you know the quick bits that get you to the juicy part of each of the classes, and generally like how they work, so that you don't have to listen to a long, subject or a long like PowerPoint on each of them before you figure out like what the class actually does. I'm going to tell you what these classes actually do. And thanks to Google Trends, we're starting off with the Thaumaturge, because that's one of the most researched things in Pathfinder, and it has been for a really long time. So many people have been so excited for the Thaumaturge, and honestly, I also am very excited about the Thaumaturge. I think both of the classes were done really, really well. But the Thaumaturge is a lot more up my alley, because it is just, it's kind of like an investigator kind of class, and I love the investigator, and it uses a lot of intelligence to break monsters down and defeat them. So today we're going to talk about the Thaumaturge. Now, the Thaumaturge is I would like to say like a sub-fighter archetype or a sub-martial archetype. Its main focus are the utility and variety of things it can do, rather than its straight martial abilities. Not like the fighter, monk, or ranger, or barbarian, who all fit very much the pure martial archetype. Something like the Thaumaturge is a little bit more flexible and has a lot more things they can do. Doesn't mean they do less damage or anything like that, but the Thaumaturge is geared more towards its utility and flexibility than it is its combat abilities. And that's not more represented by the fact that it can only take charisma as its key ability modifier for its class. So no matter how you make your Thaumaturge, starting out, you will not be able to have either strength or dex as an 18 whatsoever. So you're going to be a little behind the other martial classes, at least until level 5, and then you could have a stat at 18 like they will. Theirs might be at 19, but for 5 levels, you're going to be fine, so it's not a big deal. Another thing I should mention as well, they only get 8 plus constitution health per level. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time saying this. They only get about 8 plus con per level in HP, making them a little bit squishier than some of the other martials. Again, that's not a big deal, and they make up for it because they get access to medium armor. They get access to medium armor proficiency starting out, which is really good. It's really easy to make your Thaumaturge a heavy armor character if you really want to, especially because honestly, you have to choose, right? You have to choose whether you want to go with strength or dex. And dex is not a bad Magus build either, but I think like strength and con are a very solid one, especially if you want to make a good frontlining Thaumaturge. So the Thaumaturge is pretty good, but one thing I find utterly fascinating is they're just behind Rogue as far as starting out skill proficiencies. So they start out with Arcana, Religion, Occultism, and Nature trains. They also get 3 plus Intelligence modifier in their skill proficiencies. This makes them really close to the rogue, actually, in their skill proficiencies. And not only that, but I should mention, they get a unique skill proficiency called Esoteric Lore. Esoteric Lore is a lore skill. It's a restricted lore skill, though, because it can only be, well, I guess all lore skills are technically restricted, but not like Bardic Lore or what's the other one? It's from an archetype, the Lore Master Lore. This one can't be used for everything. It can only be used for creatures, haunts, and curses. So compared to those Omni Lores, this one is a lot more restricted. But in exchange, Esoteric Lore gets all the way up to Legendary automatically as you level. Anytime you could up Esoteric Lore, it automatically improves to the next level. So at level 5, or at level 7, it becomes at level, I think 3 or 5, I can't remember. 3 or 5, it becomes Expert. At level 7, it becomes Master. And at level 15, it becomes Legendary, which actually puts it above things like Bardic Lore and Lore Master Lore, because those only, I think, actually get to Expert. Now, again, it's more restricted, but you can use it to recall knowledge on creatures, which is like the number one thing people use recall knowledge for, like, most of the time. And there's even a feat, I believe, that allows you to roll it, or I think it goes with one of their implements, that allows you to use Esoteric Lore for, it's a feat. It's a feat, and you can use it for other things, but you have a -2 to it, which makes it one of the best lore skills in the game. And Esoteric Lore is a lore skill that uses your charisma rather than your intelligence. Don't ask me to justify this. You understand the ways, and you have a good sense and feeling for the, I guess, unseen connections between objects and people. And so it's a sense that transcends intelligence and wisdom, and it's just something you kind of go with your gut. That's kind of what it's all about. I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal. If you know about my prior video talking about the Thaumaturge and the Psychic, the Thaumaturge I felt was a little janky, and they fixed a lot of the jank. I still don't like the fact that their whole esoteric thing is based on charisma, but whatever. They already have 2 other straight intelligence-based martial classes, so they want to give it a little bit more diversity, and I can just overlook it. I think it's cool. I think it's all right. And not only that, but honestly, the Thaumaturge is very motivated to up their intelligence anyway, because they get so many skill proficiencies, and they get all the knowledge-based skill proficiencies right out the gate. So, they have a lot of motivation to do that. But there is so much more. The Thaumaturge is, in my eyes, a martial class that's trying to be a magic caster. They got so many fun feats and abilities that kind of give them magic-like abilities, or they can make like spell scrolls that they can use, even though they don't have the cast a spell activity. They don't even have like trick magic item. There's a lot of really fun things about the Thaumaturge. They even get feats like the familiar feat, like right out the gate. They have access to it, which I think is pretty cool. The Thaumaturge is a martial class that's all about having the right tool at the right time and exploiting magical weaknesses, or exploiting specific weaknesses. Speaking of, let's talk about exploit vulnerability and how it works. Exploit vulnerability is going to be the Thaumaturge's bread and butter skill. It's kind of like devise a stratagem, but not really. They use an action. I guess it's more like hunt prey. Hunt prey is a better way of looking at it. Essentially, they pick a target. They pick any creature, which, people count as creatures too. So creature is just a definition for whatever the game constitutes that's like not a pure inanimate object, or like a trap or something like that. Golems count as creatures, so do other kind of construct creatures. So people, everything count as creatures. So they pick a creature. They roll their Esoteric Lore against a standard DC for that level, which means this, even if it's a rare creature, which normally, like for recall knowledge kind of skills, have a higher difficulty, this, you don't worry about it. This isn't recall knowledge, though you can bake in with a feat, you can bake in recall knowledge into your esoteric or your exploit vulnerability check. So, they have ways of doing some really cool and fascinating things. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you make it against a creature. If you succeed, you know their highest weakness, if they have any. That's it. But you also get to apply a weakness to them. You can either apply their mortal weakness or a personal antithesis. But before we get to that part, let me tell you about what happens when they crit, because woo, it's awesome. So if they crit, which by the way, they have a really high chance of doing it, because standard per level is assuming your character is expert. That's like where like the 50-50 DC is. So once you start getting master and legendary in your esoteric lore, you're going to be that much more likely to crit on this check. And actually, is it standard lore? Let me double check something real quick. Is it standard DC? It's for the creature's level, not necessarily your level. So if it's higher than you, you're going to have to, it's going to be a little harder. But if it's your level, you got a really good chance of critting. And when you crit, you learn all of its resistances, weaknesses, and immunities. And not only this, but uniquely for one of the very few times in Pathfinder 2E, you learn what the numbers are. That's right. You look at the creature's sheet, and you look at what their resistance is, what their weakness is. Obviously, immunity doesn't have a number because they're just straight up immune, but you know exactly how much extra damage you're doing. You know how much damage the creature is reducing from certain types of damages. That is nuts. That's so good. In a battle, in a game that has a lot of strategy elements, knowing those numbers is a huge boon, an absolutely massive boon. But let's talk about the weaknesses they can apply. So mortal weakness is they apply to that creature and all creatures of the same type. So if it's a werewolf, all werewolves in that fight, you apply their weakness, and you apply their highest weakness. You take some like silver shavings, or you take, I don't know, some like some kind of like burning material, slather it on your weapon or your fists, and then you apply it to that creature and all creatures of the same type. And it's more or less the same creature. Same token. If they're the same token, it applies to all those tokens. And you apply their weakness. Now, if the creature doesn't have a weakness, you can apply instead their personal antithesis. And I actually think you get the chance to choose, because how the personal antithesis works is you take an object symbolizing the creature. Like if it is a slaver, you show them a pair of broken shackles and it shakes them, whatever. It doesn't matter. You tap into some unknown connection that applies a weakness of 2 plus half your level, which is massive. That's pretty good. That means that you're always applying a creature's weakness. It doesn't matter if your damage rolls are not good. You're consistently adding damage. Now, you can only do this to one creature. Even if there's multiple slavers in this room, you can only have one creature affected by personal antithesis. And not only that, but if you were to use exploit vulnerability again on a different creature, that goes away. So you can't just like target a bunch of creatures with it or whatever. It allows you to nail one creature down. And I have to also mention, creatures with exploited vulnerability put onto them, your essential hunt prey, are going to be the target of many effects of the Thaumaturge. This is a super necessary action, and it's just the same as hunt prey is for the ranger, without the same kind of like bonuses and such. This is a really good effect overall. And not only that, but while you have a creature exploited, my apologies, not exploited, for any creature, as long as you're wielding a one-handed weapon and a implement of yours in the other hand, you do an additional 2 damage per weapon die when you make strikes with that weapon. And it can be a ranged weapon. There's even a feat that allows you, well, we'll talk about that in a second, but as long as it's a one-handed weapon and you're holding an implement in your other hand, you're doing an additional 2 damage. And if that creature is exploited, or yeah, their vulnerability is exploited, then you do also their weakness or their personal antithesis extra damage. This makes it so that even though the Thaumaturge is pretty much restricted to using one-handed weapons, like, this is the big thing about the Thaumaturge. This is one of the things that I think kind of sucks because it really limits the amount of weapons you have. But the big thing about the Thaumaturge is that you're wielding an implement in one hand and a weapon in the other. And so you're going to want to do this, even if another weapon could have a higher damage. That +2 per damage die will actually make a one-handed weapon do more, plus all the effects that you can bring out. You're just going to want to use a one-handed weapon. So keep that in mind. If you plan on playing a Thaumaturge, you're going to be using a one-handed weapon as your main weapon throughout the entire campaign. And the exploited weakness and the implement empowerment will help ease that by giving you really high damage bases, so that even if you're using a D6 weapon or probably a D8, I know a lot of people will probably go for the bigger damage die, but if you're going for a D6, even if you're going for a D4 weapon with a lot of different traits on it, which honestly sounds like a more interesting build in my opinion, you're still going to be doing really good consistent damage. You're not going to be reaching the same highs as Barbarian, and you're going to struggle to do the same consistent damage as Fighter does, but you are going to be doing a good amount of damage, especially against your exploited target overall. And this is the main thing around the Thaumaturge, is the use of exploit vulnerability and the implements. So there's 9 implements in the game. It was 10 effort. 9 implements in the game right now. Anyway, they may add more in the future, but right now there's 9. They're probably not going to do more than that, because the big thing about Thaumaturge is the rule of 3, which I happen to have my favorite number is 3, which makes Thaumaturge perfect for me. But yeah, so there's the rule of 3. There's 9 implements, 3 of active implements, passive implements, and reaction-based implements. And over the course of leveling up, you get 3 implements. And those implements cannot be the same type of implement. That doesn't mean it can't be 2 reactions, or it can be 2 reactions, but you can't take the tome and then another tome and then another tome to get a bunch of skill proficiencies. That's not how it works. You gotta pick a different one every time. But it's really good. Not only that, but the first implement you have and the second implement you have, you get the second one at level 5. Once you hit level 7, you can pick between those two which one will go up to the next level, the adept level, essentially. So you're not actually stuck with whatever implement you pick out right out the gate. You might pick an implement that gives you good beginning bonuses, and then pick a second one that gives you more combat bonuses, and then upgrade that second one as you go. It's really good, and then when you level up, you'll get another implement to adept, and then you'll get your third implement, and then you'll upgrade your one of your implements to that paragon level. So even at later levels, you get to pick again, essentially, which one you want to go to the next level, and then you get 1 paragon, 1 adept, and 1 initiate, and then there's a feat, like late game feat, level 18, that lets you get a second adept level implement. So this video is already going to be a little bit long, at least longer than some of the other class videos. So I'm just going to go over my favorite 3 implements, and then you're just going to have to read the rest either looking in a deep dive or when it comes out on Archive and Nethys. But let's look into some of my favorite ones. All right, I got the book pulled up here because I don't want to get anything wrong when looking at this. And the first one is a little complicated, but the bell is actually really cool. It's a reaction-based implement, and the first thing you get is when the target of your exploit vulnerability makes a strike or casts a spell that affect you or one of your allies, and you're holding your bell implement and the creature is within 30 feet of you, you can ring the bell and get one of two effects. Now, if they're casting a spell, they must succeed a fort save against your class DC. Your class DC comes up a lot, and you do get to master in your class DC throughout the leveling. And I think it's just master. Let me double check if they get up to legendary. It does not look like it. They just get to Thaumaturge Mastery, yeah. So you get up to Mastery, which not all classes do. And when they have to make a fort save if they're casting a spell. This is genius because you're using their weakest stat. Almost universally, all spellcasters suck at fortitude. So you're going to be using this, and it makes sense because your mastery, you don't get master until like level 17 or something like that, which is a little rough. That's why you target their weakest one. And essentially, if they fail, they become stupefied 1 until the end of your next turn. And this doesn't disrupt the spell. They don't have to make a flat check to avoid losing their spell. But this does essentially lower their spell DC and their spell attack roll, which is pretty good. And you can also do this for melee strikes. Actually any kind of strike. It can be ranged or melee. You use Disrupting Harmony, which allows you to apply a will save, which isn't universally weak against all martial type enemies, but a good amount of them are not good at their will saves. And that makes the enemy either enfeebled 1 or clumsy 1. And I'm assuming it doesn't really specify, but I'm assuming you're picking the one that the enemy is using. Enfeeble more often than not, but they're using a finesse weapon and they're using it. And it has to be the one they're using. You get to know. So you don't make a bad decision. You can make them clumsy if they're using a finesse. So overall, it's pretty good. And if they crit fail, it's stupefied 2 or enfeebled 2 until the end of your next turn. And it's the end of your next turn, which is really good. And it pretty much stops them throughout. But when you get the adept benefit, this goes for 3 rounds. 3 rounds. That's devastating. Not only that, but you're almost always aiming at their weakest saves. So this makes the bell really strong, actually. And not only that, but all implements get a benefit at level 9 that's called Intensify Vulnerability. And essentially, it's a single action. You make a strike, and if you hit, something happens. For the bell, if you successfully strike the target, they get a -2 status penalty to saves against your bell, or a -3 if it was a crit hit. That makes it even harder because you're already aiming at their lowest saves typically, and you're putting a status penalty on top of it. That is really bad, and it's going to cause a lot of headaches, and they're going to be crit failing your save probably quite a lot. That's really nutty, and the Paragon benefit is the conditional values go up by 1, so if they just fail, it's stupefied 2, clumsy, or enfeebled 2. And if they crit it, it's 3 all around. And not only that, but you can use this on even targets that are not affected by your exploit vulnerability. The bell is really good at disrupting your enemies. And I love it. I love it because when you get multiple implements, something you all should know as well, you get as a free action to swap implements right before you take an action that would use that implement. So just having the bell as one of your implements in your back pocket or whatever, you can just suddenly, as a reaction, swap to that bell and ring it to disrupt your enemy. Your bell is always going to be available to you when you need it. You don't need to worry about what implement you have out at any moment. Your bell will be always ready for you, making it a really good implement. It makes a good secondary implement in my eyes, but, obviously, it's still a really good implement overall, and it'll make you an utter nuisance to your DM. It's great. The next implement I'm going to talk about is the regalia, which a lot of people have been side-eyeing a little bit, because it's not very combat focused. The regalia, and if you don't know what a regalia is, it's some kind of marker, or it's like a scepter, a crown, whatever, that shows, like rulership in some form. And the regalia is all about motivating yourself and your allies by just how majestic you are. I actually really like it because when you have the regalia, this is a passive buff, you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to deception, diplomacy, and intimidation checks. Not only that, but allies who can see you can follow the expert in exploration mode, even if you're just trained in a skill and not expert, due to the competency you clearly exude. When they do so in this way, the bonus is +1. The bonus is +1. And when you're holding your regalia, you gain an inspiring aura that stokes the courage of you and your allies in a 15-foot emanation, giving them a +1 status bonus to saving throws against fear. And at the end of your turn, at the same time you would reduce your frightened condition, you can also reduce the frightened condition of all allies within your inspiring aura by 1. So starting out, this doesn't look like anything exciting. It's just a bonus to skill checks, right? Wrong. Because you're charisma focused already, your deception, diplomacy, and intimidation skills are already going to be jacked. On top of that, you can use all 3 in combat. Deception is great for feinting your opponents, and as a martial class, feinting is huge. Diplomacy is great for skills like bon mot, which can reduce will saves, which is really good and something to keep in mind. And intimidation can give them the frightened condition, which is one of the best conditions in the game. You are automatically just better in those skills. And not only that, they're a circumstance bonus. This will stack with any item bonuses you pick up from any magic items you have, or any status bonuses from any spells that may be applied to you. That is crazy. That is nuts. Guidance stacks, I'm pretty sure. Let me look real quick. Indeed, guidance stacks. You get guidanced, and you can get some massive bonuses. And to keep this in your memory, right? For skills like Scare to Death, which is an intimidation-based skill, you can have massive bonuses. I'm talking up to like a +7 on that intimidation check. Granted, they still have to make a fort save, I think, against your intimidation DC. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't matter. Whatever. It doesn't matter. When you roll, it's going to be huge. It's going to be big. The regalia is nuts. Because for a lot of skills that have a lot of good benefits, like feinting, when you crit against an enemy with intimidation, they become frightened too. When you feint an enemy, they're flat-footed to you until the end of your next turn. This is really good. The regalia is actually stupid solid on your Thaumaturge. But there's more benefits. When you hit Adept, the circumstance bonus you gain to deception, diplomacy, and intimidation increase to +2. And not only that, but when others are following the expert with you, you grant them a +2 circumstance bonus if you're trained, a +3 if you're expert, and a +4 or if you're master or higher. Not only this, but the aura you get grows stronger. The +1 status bonus now applies to all saving throws against mental effects rather than just fear. And your allies in the aura get a +2 status bonus to damage rolls. They do more damage as long as they're within a 15-foot emanation of you. As a martial character, you're going to be up in the enemy's face, and it's so good. And not only that, but that status bonus to damage goes up as you level. Without even going beyond Adept, you get at level 11 +3, and then at level 17 +4 status bonus to damage. You can make your allies do more damage. You can make their checks better. And you're already getting massive bonuses to things like intimidation for demoralize or feint for deception. It like the regalia is really good. The numbers start compounding really fast, and you're gonna start just inherently doing more damage just by being present in the battlefield. It's nuts. It's really, really good. But let's say you intensify the vulnerability. When you do so, and when you successfully strike the target of your exploit vulnerability, you choose an ally you can see. That ally gets a +1 circumstance bonus to its attack rolls, and this is circumstance, which stacks with things that give you status bonus, which there's a lot of spells that gives characters a status bonus to their attack rolls. Until the beginning of your next turn. Your ally, until the beginning of your next turn, gets a +1 circumstance bonus. And if you crit the enemy, it's a +2. This can make your fighter cracked out of their mind. This is really, really good. The Paragon benefit gets even better. If you roll a crit failure on checks to coerce, make an impression, or request, you get a failure instead, which is good because that means you don't reduce your rapport with them. I can't remember at this name. They don't like drop down to like neutral or hostile to you. And when others use Follow the Expert, they get a +3 circumstance bonus, or if you're expert or higher, +4. Those, like, if you're sneaking, those bonuses are going to matter a lot. And not only that, but they can be done for other things as long as Follow the Expert applies. If you're moving a large object, allies can assist you getting that bonus, or you can assist them. They have to be following you. But yeah, it's nuts. Not only that, but the aura that now applies to all mental effects also makes it so your allies cannot be flat-footed unless you're flat-footed. And if one of your allies becomes clumsy, enfeebled, frightened, sickened, or stupefied, the status penalty they take is reduced by 1 unless you are also being affected by the same condition. This makes it so that by being on the battlefield, even at high levels, which conditions apply a lot at high levels. Most enemies apply a few conditions at high levels. Endgame regalia still holds up, still does really good bonuses overall, and you can reduce those effects, and you can prevent flat-footed, which is big in martial combat. We got one more, and I'm sorry if this video is taking a little bit longer than standard. These are big classes, and they got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sure you guys are not going to be too upset about hearing a little bit more about them anyway. So let's go over one more implement, shall we? All right, last but not least on our list of implements is the wand, which I think is really good. Again, a lot of people are side-eyeing it because of, like, damage numbers and how they work. But essentially, you get the ability to fling magic. You use your wand to cast a cantrip. That's pretty much it. It has a range of 60 feet. It does a D4 plus your charisma modifier. And at the same level that it would heighten for other cantrips, yours increases as well by a D4. You get a cantrip. You get a cantrip that does nothing really extra. So it's a little weaker than standard cantrips. That's why a lot of people give this one the big side eye, right? Not only that, but their save, it's a basic reflex save, so it's not even like a spell attack. It's a basic reflex against your class DC, which is going to be lower than most spellcasters at your level by 1 to 2 degrees, which is massive. But let's look at it a little bit deeper, and you'll start seeing the major benefits. First of all, you can expend more energy than normal. You can essentially boost the fling magic, making it do D6s rather than D4s. Same for all the heightened dice as well, which is better than most cantrips damage-wise. And because this is based on saves, the enemy is always going to at least take half the damage. So you're doing very consistent magic damage. And when you pick a wand, you have to choose between cold, electricity, or fire. We'll get into that in a little bit longer. But even after you amp the wand, you can't amp it again for another D4 rounds. But you can still use it normally with the D4s. On top of this, if you crit during that time, your wand automatically resets and you can use the amped fling magic again, which is really good. Now, when you get the adept benefit, the fling magic increases to 120 feet. Now, most cantrips actually have a range of like 30 feet. 120 is the same as Ray of Frost, or I think, yeah, Ray of Frost. So that's already really good. The range increase is nuts. But not only that, based on the type of magic you use, you get an additional effect if the enemy fails your check. If it's cold, they take a -10 status penalty to their speed for 1 round. Pretty much the same as Ray of Frost. If it's electricity, they're flat-footed until the end of your next turn. That's pretty good. If it's fire, they take a D10 persistent fire damage or 2d10 on a crit failure. That's higher than most fire-based effects. If you have the Wand Paragon benefit, this increases to 2d10 persistent fire damage or 4d10 on a critical. So if you get to the final end, the fire actually does a massive amount of extra damage. And not only that, but when you get the added benefit, you can pick between 2 elements. You get the one you initially picked and then an additional one, and every time you use Fling Magic, you can pick between the 2, giving you a lot of versatility when you're using the weapon. But wait, there's more. Let's look at its Intensify vulnerability. When you intensify, you don't strike the enemy normally. Instead, you use Fling Magic to damage the target of your exploit vulnerability, and you deal additional damage to the creature equal to the number of damage dice of the wand. That means for each heightened extra damage die, you're doing 1 additional damage. And because it is a save, even if they succeed, they still take that additional damage even though it gets cut in half. It makes your wand do a lot of extra damage. And when you go to Paragon, your range increases to 180 feet, which is longer than most cantrips. And you get a pick from all 3 damage types whenever you use Fling Magic. And you can choose to either target a single creature or target a 20-foot burst. You can just launch a fireball at people because you know what? At level 17, that's going to be 8d4 or 8d6s, and it's a save that they're going to have to try to get around. And when you hit level 18, I believe, or actually level 17, I think, they're gonna be going against a master difficulty, which means enemies at your level are gonna have a less than 50% chance of avoiding it. The wand is really good for applying damage, and not only that, but because the wand is so good, you can use it instead of some weapons, just playing a more reserved style. This allows you to go a lot more support with some of the other implements, or allowing you to, excuse me, do things like grapple enemies or the like. It's very, very good. And that is all we're talking about implements today. There's so many good implements. Let me just burn through a couple feats real quick. 3 feats because we're keeping on that rule of 3. And not only that, but because I always do feats in these videos anyway, they're not long. First is Ammunition Thaumaturge. This allows you to use your implement hand to essentially be able to interact to reload weapons that you're holding, or that you're using. So, Gun Thaumaturge is a thing, and they even mention bullets here specifically. So if you get access to guns, you can use a gun and your implement together. And it's really cool. I absolutely love it. The next feat we're going to talk about is One More Activation. It's really cool, though it's a little limited. With one of your invested items, if they have a once per day or less activation, you can activate it a second time as long as the item level is less than half your level or less, which kind of sucks because if you get a really cool weapon like the Searing Lance or whatever that lets you cast Searing Light once per day, you're not going to be able to use it until like level like 18 or something like that. I think it's a level 9 item, but you get extra activations on your items, and this is pretty big. As long as you haven't done it and you can't do it in the same turn. So they have one action activation. You can't do it twice in the same turn. But this is really good because a lot of the good support items like Boots of Speed and all that kind of stuff, Cloak of Elvenkind, they're not that high a level. By the time you're in the 10 to 15 range, you'll be able to activate these really good items twice per day, which is really, really good. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Twin Weakness, which is great. It's essentially a double attack or a dual attack with your implement and your weapon. I absolutely love it. So essentially you have to be holding your implement and a weapon, and you're using exploit vulnerability with a mortal weakness or a personal antithesis against the target. That's the requirements. Because what happens is you make an attack against your target and you slap them with your implement at the same time, applying their personal weakness or personal antithesis twice. Now, this does count as 2 attacks when calculating your multiple attack penalty, but because you only have to successfully strike with the melee weapon against your exploited target, you're just doing double the weakness damage as a second action. This is really good. This is really good. If it's your second, like if the enemy is already exploited and you're not planning on intensifying this round, you can strike the enemy and then you can go for the double whammy, low chance but high damage output. Or if you want to play it safe, you can use it on your first attack for the round and do a bunch of damage. This works really good with regalia, especially because you can feint the enemy, then use this maneuver to get a really big strike off. And if you're hasted especially, you can strike, do the feint, and then use Twin Weakness. And at this level, even personal antithesis, which might do less damage than personal weakness overall, is still doing 7 damage. You're doing 14 extra damage to your target as long as you successfully hit the target. It's really good, and the Thaumaturge is amazing. I wish I could go further. This video is already so long. We're already at like the 40-minute mark, and I wanted to make these videos as short as I could, but this class especially is very complicated. And so I figure it was in my due diligence to talk about especially some of the features that people are overlooking because they're good. Everything is good. Paizo did amazing with these 2 classes, giving you a lot of options to pick from when it comes with how you play with the class. It's really solid. This is a great martial class. I'm probably going to jump into my top 5 favorite classes once I get my hands on it in an actual campaign. I absolutely love it. And there's so many other good feats and good implements that I didn't mention in this video. The ones I mentioned in this video are some of my favorites and some of the ones I feel that people overlook, but some of them are just plain good. Check out videos like No Nat Ones, who did a full, he went all the way through Thaumaturge. He did it early, so most of you probably have already seen it. Doesn't matter. These feats are great. These implements are really good. That's going to be it. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.